Hey, it's Josh. We are here in the shop. We're getting ready to extract some honey. I thought you all might want to see some of the process, so I'm getting set up on the table now. And we've got some supers that we pulled today out of the apiary. And I'll show you guys how I do the extraction. Figured you all might want to come along for the ride. Okay, the first piece of equipment that I use is this Pierce beekeeping, I guess you would call it a honey stripping. I'm not sure what the official name is, but you use it to put your frames of honey on top of here, kind of like a, uncapping tub is what it's called. And I have an electric decapping knife. Plug it in, this heats up, gets really hot, and I'll show you how it works. But I actually take off the top layer of the honeycomb on the frames, and then some of the honey and the wax drips down in here, collects down at the bottom. This does have a valve on it, so I can recover the honey that I lose during the uncapping process. It'll filter through here. Even if there gets cappings come in here, I have a separate screen that I use later that I'll show you to filter out all the wax. But this is also any of the wax cappings that come out in here, I harvest and I put it in my solar melter, and that's where I make those beeswax bars that I showed you in another video. So I will go ahead and show you how I uncap a frame. Okay, so we've got our first super here. Probably have about 5-6 frames with honey in it. So the first thing that you always have to do is you have to check to make sure that the moisture content of the honey is below a certain point. It really needs to be below 20%, ideally below 18%. Anything below 18% is good. Generally speaking, if the honey's been capped, like in this frame, the moisture content is probably pretty low. The bees know that, that's why they cap it. If it's uncapped like this, there's a couple ways you can check it. You can do what's called the shake test, which if you don't see a bunch of nectar falling out, generally speaking, it's probably good. But the way to truly test it is with a refractometer. And so the refractometer, basically you just take a little sample of honey, toothpick, whatever you got, put it here on the refractometer. Doesn't take much. Close it down. And you all aren't going to be able to see this, but if you look through this up through the light, and you look, you'll see a blue line. So this sample is registering right at 17. I pulled a previous sample a few minutes ago and it was at 15. So generally speaking, I like to pull a few different samples. I'll pull from 3 or 4 different frames, especially the ones that are uncapped, because I really want to check and make sure that they're below the moisture content. For those of you that don't know, if you were to extract honey when the moisture content is above 20%, the honey can actually ferment in the jar, and it's disgusting. It tastes terrible. And you say, what the heck's wrong with this honey? It's awful. Well, it's actually fermented inside the jar. So that's why you always need to double check what the moisture content is before you actually begin your extraction process. And again, I will check periodically as I pull frames. So I will plug in my uncapping knife. So not a ton of honey, but again, for a fall harvest, generally don't expect too much. But it just depends. I mean, I've heard some beekeepers that had a big fall flow. So this frame is pretty full. Wait for that to heat up. bring it on in there. So this uncapping knife obviously is heated, so it gets really hot. And what it does is it basically scrapes off the top layer of these wax cappings. And so the honey is underneath these. There's still some nectar and some open ones here if you can see it. But you'll see here. And you try to not go too deep because you don't want to get real far into the honey, but you do have to scrape off the top layer or it won't get extracted. This side only has a little bit here. Put the frame in the extractor here. And this is a Vevor extractor. It's a 4-frame extractor. It holds either 4 deep frames or shallow. And for my fellow engineering nerds watching, it basically is a giant centrifuge. So it works by centrifugal force. So it spins the frames really fast, which essentially flings the honey out of the cells up against the side of the extractor, and then it falls down, and there's a honey gate. Bowen, come here, back up. There's a honey gate here in front that once all the honey collects inside, I can open this honey gate, and this is a double stainless steel mesh filtering. So it's just a physical filtration just based off the size, and that just makes sure that any sort of bee parts or any sort of wax cappings ultimately don't make its way into the honey. But this is the only filtering that I do at all, is through this double stainless steel mesh. That's it. There's no other filtering that takes place. So we'll go ahead and uncap our next one. Now next year I'm going to try, you can see like I have to kind of dig in on these. There's some beekeepers that don't put all 10 super frames in for this exact reason. I'm going to try that next year myself. I bought a spacer that lets me equally space 9 frames instead of 10 in the super. And they asked, why would you want to do that? Because the bees will draw the comb out fatter because there's less space. And ultimately what that means is it'll be easier to extract because these wax cappings will stick out further from the wood, from the frame here. And then you can real easily just run this knife down and take off that top layer rather than what I'm doing, which is kind of digging in a little bit. You'll be able to just take your knife right across here like this. Whereas what I'm doing here is I'm having to dig in a little bit, trying to feather it, just take that top layer off the cappings, not digging in too deep and taking all the honey out. It's a balancing act here. So I'm going to try that next year and just see how it goes. As I was pulling the supers off today, I'm estimating there's about 30 or 40 pounds of honey total, which is not that much, but you know, hey, it's better than nothing. And honestly, it's pretty light. It's a lot lighter than I thought it was going to be. In the middle of the summer, when I was doing inspections and pulling some frames out that had honey, it was dark. So I'm going to have to ask the experts in our area here what they suspect the bees were foraging on for this, because I don't know. I don't know if this is clover honey, white clover. There was tons of white clover in our yard when the bees were first starting to store this. It's definitely something light. And there's some pollen in this frames too, but it's, you know, there's not a whole lot. But this, I mean, this honey is as light as the spring honey that I pulled. All right. I know you all can't smell it, but it smells wonderful over here. Go smell, Bowen.
It does.
Can you smell it?
Yeah.
All right, one more and then we'll do our first spin here. Get this cap off here. Now, as I was explaining in my previous video, I've started mite treatments for the fall time period on my hives. So certain miticides can only be used when honey has been removed from the hive. And Apiguard is one of those, which is what I'm using. There are some that can be used while you have supers on, but I don't fuss with mite treatments during a flow. Mite Away Quick Strips is one that you can use with supers on. Formic Pro is another one. And then there's a litany of ones you can use after you've pulled honey supers. So you just, you know, pick your favorite one and run with it. I'm trying Apiguard for the first time this year. There's a lot of fellow beekeepers that swear by it. But like with anything in beekeeping, your mileage may vary. So we'll see. All right. Now with my sticky fingers.
That's all four.
Okay, so all this is, again, it's got a motor, spins. Can you show them down in here, Dad? Just make sure they see it when I turn it on. I'll go ahead and take off this one glove. Now, I do have this bolted to the floor now, so hopefully it's not going to wobble as much. Like any centrifuge, if you don't have it equally balanced on each side, it tends to wobble on you, but this does have a speed control on it, so I can control how fast it spins. So we'll start it off on a slow speed here, and we'll see what happens. You just got to be patient with it. Let the honey fling out. I don't know if you get down in there, Dad, if you start to see the honey whipping out on the sides of the wall here.
Oh.
That's honey.
Oh, wow. Look at that.
So we'll let it spin here for a little bit. See it, Bowen?
Yeah, you can see the honey on the wall.
Yep.
Oh, you're getting fast. That's kind of fast.
I generally run it for a minute or so. You want to make sure that it's spun really well. And then what we're going to do is we'll stop it and we'll turn the frames the other way around, because you got to get honey out of both sides. Right now, the only honey that's being extracted is the honey facing the outer wall.
What's that sound that keeps the
It's just shaking.
I think it's the doors that make
You think so? There it goes.
Oh, see? It's like popcorn.
Yep, so we'll let it spin here for Another 30 seconds or so, make sure that gets good and extracted.
Even bolted to the ground, it's shaking.
All right, I think that's good.
I don't know if you guys can see, but there's like a ton of honey at the bottom.
Yep, there's all the honey.
Okay, so now open it up. In each frame, if you look at it now, you can see the honey's out of those cells. See how all the honey's come out? But on the other side, all that honey's still in there.
A lot of honey.
So
which means you might want to like
you gotta flip it around. That's right, Bo. Flip it around and spin the other.
Spin it again.
Spin the other
so all
side.
that's out, and then if you walk on the other side,
Spin to win. This frame's a little lighter, so if this next one isn't very heavy, let me alternate some frames. Again, you want to try to balance the load as much as you can. It keeps it from wobbling too much.
and I think
This is okay.
Ooh, that's a lot.
All right.
Now we wait. Starting slow again.
Yep, we'll just start slow.
Oh, here's that popcorn noise.
It's just the metal popping, Bo. And I can already see honey in the bottom of the tank.
It's so
It's
much.
the
It's on my
nectar
mind.
of the gods.
So much. Oh my god. You can see it's this thick.
All right, now we can crank it up.
Oh god.
It's squealing a little bit. Now I do have some food grade grease that I can use on this. I may put a little bit down there just to keep it from squealing.
Should probably do it now. It's less than the other drums.
So we'll let it, again, you want to let it spin for quite a while here. We'll let it spin for about another 30 seconds or so. Make sure all that good honey gets extracted. And then you just put the wet frames back in your supers and set them outside, and the bees do all the cleanup for you. It's very nice of them to do that, free of charge. And I'll show you the bee feeding frenzy that it creates when I do that.
I think that's enough.
You think it's enough?
Yeah.
Okay.
It probably is a little bit.
All right.
Put your safety gloves on. You guys put yours on.
Well, just the person that touches the honey needs the gloves. All right. I mean,
That's
that's pretty empty, isn't it?
pretty empty.
Now all that little residual honey, the bees will go nuts for that, and they'll clean it right up. So all I do is put it back in the super, and then later on, I'm gonna take all these frames and set them outside,
Speaking
and
of,
it's like ringing the dinner bell for the bees.
look at all that honey down there.
Let's show the honey down in the bottom of the
Show
tank.
it. That is insane. Look at all that.
Pretty cool, huh?
Now you just scoop all of that out and you're
That drains out the
Gotta
bottom.
drain it and filter it.
Drain it, filter it.
Open the bottom.
What do you think, Bo? What do you think?
It's a whole entire 3 buckets of.
You think that's pretty tasty stuff?
Oh yeah, I tried it. I should have. I'm gonna actually have some when I get home.
Are you? fresh off the frame.
Maybe.
All right, so that's the process, and rinse and repeat, 15 or 20 more times. And I'll be sure to show you guys what the final yield is, and I'll show you when I open the valve, the filtration process when it goes through the double mesh filtration stainless steel here. So you guys will get to see that, and I'll bring you back in. So, but for now, that's the whole process in a nutshell.